Hermetic Hour for April 22nd. That's Earth Day. And this is your host, Runyon. And as you have read our abstract, know that tonight we're going to deliver a paper called Dark Mirror Evocation and Angelic Invocation. And then I'll have a short discussion on that paper afterward. Now, this lecture was originally delivered at a symposium hosted by the Fraternity of the Hidden Light on October 5th, 2002. And I'll begin, and then after we are finished with the paper, we'll have some more time, and I want to present a less scientific and less psychological perspective because, quite frankly, this paper emphasizes the psychological and the scientific aspects of both evocation and invocation, and I think that it may be a little too unromantic for some people. Certainly for me, especially. I run it over again. I think we need to get the romance back into this. And so after we get done with the paper, we'll try to re-romanticize the subject. So I'll go right into it. Well, before we get to the meat of this discussion, please allow me to clarify a few points regarding the OTA's angelic invocation and spirit evocation techniques. Now, these practices have nothing whatsoever to do with black magic or Satanism. The way our system is constructed, it could not even be misused for dark and sinister purposes without a sinister effect on the person himself. In other words, a serious psychic backlash to anyone unwise enough to make such an attempt. Now, why is this so? Well, for the compelling reason that in our system, one's own reflection in a mirror is used as a start point for conjuration to visible appearance in spirit evocation. Now, this is a practice which the uninformed refer to as summoning demons. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that trying to send a psychic component of your own personality, no matter how archetypal and transpersonal that component might be, off to hurt somebody else. This is analogous to lighting the fuse on a stick of dynamite, then wishing it would somehow fly out the window, sail all the way across town, and blow up your enemy. In this case, your enemy is yourself, and you are a lot closer to home. Now, I'm not saying that these angels, spirits, and elementals are entirely individual and personal. On the contrary, we all share in a universal population of archetypes, shadow fragments, and even superior and inferior non-human sentient beings. But our perceptions of these entities are always subjective. We access a greater universe beyond through the lesser universe within. As my esteemed colleague, Maestro Lon Duquette, puts it, it's all in your head, but you have no idea how big your head is. And as I said in the Magic of Solomon video, your mind reaches out to the farthest star, as above, so below. I would remind those poorly informed critics who jump to the conclusion that the OTA ceremonial magic, because of its dimly lighted setting, its exotic trappings, and its sonorous conjurations, is therefore evil and sinister. It is no more evil and sinister than Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, and certainly no more demonic than that venerable tradition. As in Tibetan Tantric practice, we master the rebellious spirits within ourselves on the path to spiritual enlightenment. The Tibetans have hundreds of gods, goddesses, and demons, and yet they are still Buddhists. We have a pantheon of pre-biblical gods, goddesses, and demons, and all of the angels, and yet we are still Hermetic. All of these manifestations are aspects of one ineffable, omnipresent, and omniscient great architect of the universe, whose identical sparks of holy fire ensoul us all. As I have said, we have a spiritually valid, well-balanced system of ceremonial magic perfected in over 30 years of constant practice. But we are not the only people who engage in such activities. In the last 10 years, there's been a worldwide revival of Solomonic ceremonial magic. Now, the OTA was indirectly responsible for this popularization. Over the years, our secret techniques began to leak out, and finally, when a distorted version of our Goetic Evocation method was mass-marketed by a major occult publisher, we decided that we would come forward and we would openly teach what we had originally discovered and developed in secret. Unfortunately, the unauthorized popular version of our method ignored the prerequisites of self-hypnosis training, yoga training, and the angelic spiritual balancing so necessary for positive, progressive, and meaningful practice in this art. One of the major spiritual and psychological problems inherent in the magical evocation of King Solomon's rebellious spirits in this modern godless age is the lack of a balancing, positive, or higher power to satisfy the evocation of lower or disorganized elements of the psyche that we call spirits. This lack of balance affects almost any magician willing to venture into such deep waters, because he or she is a rebel to begin with, and often has turned his or her back upon the deeply imprinted symbols of traditional religion. I think this is a mistake. Now, I'm a Hermetic classical pagan, but I long ago discovered the awesome power of the traditional Judeo-Christian and Muslim archangels, especially the 4 quadrant guardians, Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Oriel. In OTA practice, we do not permit any member to participate in Goetic evocation operations before he or she has undergone a series of 4 separate angelic invocations. These 4 great archangels not only govern the 4 compass quadrants of the magic circle, they also rule the 4 elemental signs of the zodiac, the signs of air, fire, water, and earth. Through these triplicities, they also govern the 72 lesser angels of the Shemaham Farash, who also inhabit the great circle of the zodiac on a level just above the 72 fallen angels of the Goetia. Now, I do not wish to give the impression that the Goetia's spirits and the Shemaham Farash angels were created together as components of the same system back in medieval times. Solomon's Goetia spirits may have been originally of Hebrew origin, but they came to us filtered through the Arabians and written down by the Christians. They are the 72 jinn of the Arabian Nights, contained in a sealed brass vessel and assigned to the levels of a Christian Tartarus, not to a Hebrew Qliphoth. At about the same time, this is about 500 years ago, the 72 Shemaham Farash angels, who had been created from a cipher based upon three verses in Exodus, recounting Moses' parting of the Red Sea, escaped from the Hebrew Kabbalah and were welcomed into the Hermetic Kabbalah. And it didn't take very long for the Hermetic practitioners to add the sigils and Latin invocations to the Shemaham Farash. And the next step was obvious. They became the governing counterparts for the rebellious spirits of the Goetia. So far, so good. But no one seems to agree on the starting point or the actual order of the angels and the spirits around the zodiac. The Golden Dawn starts their progression at 0 degrees Leo. Von Ducat, following Crowley, splits his Goetia spirits into separate day and night sequences. Aaron Ledich breaks the Shemay Farash sequence into 4 elemental triplicities in yet another attempt to connect the Kabbalah with the Enochian system, but the OTA keeps it simple. Our Master Mandala starts at 0 degrees Aries for both Goetia and Shemay Farash sequences, running them straight around the zodiac together, and it works very well. You should always briefly invoke the appropriate Shemay Farash angel before summoning any Goetia spirit. The angel sigil should be on the obverse side of the Goetia spirit parchment sigil in your brass vessel. However, I will go further to recommend that you invoke the Shemay Farash angel into a crystal using the Almadel method on the evening previous to your first encounter with any Goetia spirit as a separate and complete operation. You will find these angels very helpful and very powerful. Now, you may also do this in the same session before the Goetic Evocation. Now, this requires moving some temple furniture around between the invocation and the evocation, but it does work very well. This follows after your 4 invocations of the archangels in your training period, ruling the compass quadrants and the Shemay Farash. So, how do we invoke angels? Well, in these apparitions, we use an altar in the middle of the circle with a crystal orb in its top center. And the altar is constructed in such a way that the 4 candles at each corner are shielded and reflected inward. The altar top is ventilated so that the incense from below will float up through the slots in the top and surround the orb with luminous tendrils of pungent smoke. We sit on low stools surrounding the altar, and we gaze up at the orb from an angle that automatically induces an altered state of consciousness. Round-robin invocations are intoned, while those not invoking call the angel's name in a droning overtone chant. Raphael, 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 Raphael. When contact is achieved, we see a gold and blue-violet aura on the altar top. This glory is exactly as described by the famous 17th century magician Dr. Thomas Rudd in his treatise on angel magic.